Hello again, everyone. We are back, and we have next Donna Benjamin to tell us about the Open Practice Library and contributing to it. So, Donna Benjamin is a passionate advocate of free and open source software. For the past 2 decades, Donna has been the glue for many successful organizations, teams, and individuals. Her volunteer work has been instrumental in helping open source organizations to upsize and sometimes downsize as they mature with their communities. So, Donna will be accepting questions afterwards. So if you have any questions for Donna, and please do have lots of questions, pop them into the questions tab in Venulus and I will pass them on to Donna. Donna, they're all yours.
Thank you, Betsy. Hello, everyone. Here we are at linux.conf.au 2022, and it is amazing. Please join me in sharing great exuberance and gratitude to everybody who has put this on in this virtual space. It's extraordinary. I'm also coming to you from the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people whose language is Woiwurrung. So I'd like to use one of their words, Wominjeka, to this session, live and synchronous, contribute to the Open Practice Library. Thanks for the introduction, Betsy. I'm humbled and kind of awed to be here. So let's get on with the show. But wait, what's the Open Practice Library? I'm so glad you asked. I've shared a link there, openpracticelibrary.com/learn, which gives a bit of a blurb. But let me start by saying that I first encountered this about 3 years ago. It was introduced to me by the wonderful Leslie Hawthorne, who some of you will know. And when I looked at this, I went, where has this been all my life? The Open Practice Library brings open and agile together. And it was the first time I'd really seen the intersection of these things. And for such a long time, I'd felt that there was so much in common between the worlds of open source and the worlds of agile and agility kind of methodologies. And yet the communities just seemed so separate, so different. There were a few bridges between those communities and there were a few people in common, but they were completely separate events and different kind of groups of people. So the Open Practice Library brings them together in a way that I think is really awesome. And early last year, I was glad to take the baton, if you like, and become the maintainer of OPL, as we call it, the TLA, the three-letter acronym of Open Practice Library is OPL. So I might use that as shorthand as we go. So feel free to grab that link and multitask a little bit as I talk. I'm going to do a bit of an introduction around what OPL is, but then I want to get into the guts of saying, well, how do you actually contribute to this thing? Because that's what I really want. I need help, and I want to encourage, cajole people to join me in this effort. So it started out as a fork of mobiusloop.com. This is referred to as an outcome-based delivery model. The infinite loop is something that we see a lot these days. It's used in all sorts of diagrams. It seems to have become the diagram of the day kind of thing. You'll see it in DevOps, but it really is in this case talking about the sort of infinite back and forth between these different elements that too often we've lived in silos. Quite often in sort of the agile delivery world, it's all about delivery and we don't necessarily get to interact and engage as much on the discovery side. The open source community hasn't necessarily been as explicit in my experience of these different modes. We kind of just roll up our sleeves and get into it, and that's really close to my heart as one of the things that we advocate is just start. Don't get too bogged down in analysis paralysis, but start somewhere, and that might be starting with asking questions like why are we doing this? Who are we doing it for? What are the outcomes that we're really looking for, and focusing on outcomes rather than outputs? In the middle, we've got a pivot phase, and then we've got a delivery phase. So that's mobiusloop.com. What we did with the Open Practice Library was fork that, and we added a new foundation layer. And I actually, it's probably not a very good analogy for a foundation layer to think of it as a seesaw, but I kind of do think of it as a seesaw because it has two components that you want to keep in balance, and those components are culture on the one hand and technology on the other. We want to keep our focus on technology and technology practices and cultural practices and methods in balance. You can't have one without the other if you want to have a strong foundation. So back to Mobius, there's three phases. So if you've got, think about, we've got this foundation of culture and technology, and then we've got these three phases that are supported by that foundation: discovery, options, and delivery. What I want to do is kind of not go too much into the Open Practice Library itself, the phases, all of that sort of stuff. I want to really focus on the contribution piece. How can you contribute? In what ways can you contribute? What sorts of people might want to contribute? What sorts of people are contributing? Last year I wrote this piece for opensource.com, 7 ways anyone can contribute to the Open Practice Library, and it can be as simple as spreading the word. And I'm sort of seeded the chat with a hashtag. I'd love you to help me do that. Hash contribute to OPL. That's a really important part of doing it. Jumping onto the site and adding a comment. If you've used a practice, if you have a question about a practice, add a comment in our comment system. Then it sort of levels up from there, right? Add a practice. If you're doing something, if you're using some kind of tool or practice or methodology to get better teamwork out of your crew, consider sharing that practice with us on the Open Practice Library. You can improve the practices that are there. That's an absolutely brilliant way of contributing and a low barrier to entry. Add a link to a reference that for that practice. Fix a typo, tweak the grammar, all of those sorts of things. Think of it a bit like the Wikipedia of open and agile practices, if you like, and just get in there and start making it better. Then there's the next levels up, which is, adding an issue or a comment on GitHub. And then finally, there's helping with the website itself. It's an open project. It's on GitHub, and patch is welcome. Patch is welcome. Or well volunteered if you do find a bug and you have the capability to help fix it. So that's sort of where I wanted to kind of explore. What I'm going to do is jump out of the presentation and jump through a few links. And this is where I think this could get a little messy. This is a little bit experimental. I do have backup material to present if it doesn't work and we can't really interact effectively. Because I did a webinar on the Open Practice Library, which has a bit more detail in it. So that's my sort of plan B to jump to that if we need to. So first up, GitHub. We're on GitHub. So go ahead, grab the link. Hopefully my trusty team is going to share these links with you in the chat, but go ahead and open github.com/openpracticelibrary/openpracticelibrary. There's a whole bunch of repositories in there. There's some history and reasons why things are the way they are, or as my good friend Stuart Smith used to say, hysterical raisins rather than historical reasons. Things just are the way they are in open projects, sometimes for good reasons and sometimes just cause. So anyway, there's some stuff in there. So head to that. The next thing is that I want to talk about is when it comes to contributing, we're using Netlify CMS, and you can log in with your GitHub ID. And I've put the sort of screenshots there of what you get if you go to the site and hit improve a practice or add a practice. You'll go to Netlify CMS, and then you'll be given this option to log in with Netlify identity. And I strongly recommend that you just continue with GitHub if you already have a GitHub account. If you don't already have a GitHub account, please go ahead and create one, because that's the kind of way we do authentication for the Open Practice Library. Underneath that, I've got just a couple of screenshots of Netlify CMS. So on the left is just the content list that you'll see once you're logged in. You'll see the list of practices. On the right is the editorial workflow, which you get if you hit that workflow link in the top nav bar there. And that shows you like a little Kanban bar, drafts, in review and ready. And there's a bunch of stuff in there at the moment that's kind of in draft and in review. I was a good girl and did some maintenance work yesterday to make sure that there wasn't anything outstanding and waiting. So that's Netlify CMS. That's really the content side of it. So if you're interested in adding practices and improving practices, then Netlify CMS is the place to play. Whereas GitHub is if you're more interested in the community itself and the infrastructure of the community, then that's where we sort of play with all of that. I said that spreading the word is one way to contribute, and we're on the socials. I did a post on LinkedIn a little while ago, which got some really interesting responses. We've kind of really activated Twitter over the past year. There is an Instagram account, which has nothing in it. I'm not really a big Instagram user, so that's an area for future development, if you like, and maybe a volunteer might be interested in helping drive engagement around the community through Insta. And there's also a Slack instance, but it's problematic. It exists, etc. I'm going to speak a little bit more about some of the problems in a little bit. Yeah. So. Yeah, there's a lot to do. The Open Practice Library has been around for about 5 years, and I've been the maintainer for less than 1. The community infrastructure isn't well defined. Like, we've used Github as our real-time chat. We've got this Slack channel. There's this Hive or community comment system on the site itself. So we don't really have any really clear governance. There's an issue around some questions around the code of conduct and how we might tweak that. So there's work to do there. So that community infrastructure piece that, Jono talked about sort of so beautifully, just yesterday, and Kathy talked about, right, communities are systems, and some of our systems are a little bit like clunky or undefined or hard to access, and that's an area that needs help. And the community processes as well aren't necessarily well defined. Like, how do you, if you add a practice, what happens to it then? We've got a very optimistic and welcoming approach to accepting contributions. Perfect is the enemy of the good, so we don't expect it to be perfect. Just like Wikipedia, you can start with a stub, start with something and build on it, that's fine, but that's not necessarily as clearly communicated as it could be. And then the big bits, I don't have the time and I don't have the skills to do everything that I want to do. There's so much to do. There's so much potential here, and the community that has contributed so far is just wonderful. But how do we level up? How do we really make this the sort of upstream that it has the potential to be? And that's where I just really want to put it out there. I need help, and I'm hoping that by sharing this at linux.conf.au, I might be able to recruit a few willing volunteers to help me do this. So that's the guts of sort of the talk part of it, what I wanted to do. So let me now go backwards a little bit and give you all an opportunity to jump into GitHub, jump into the Open Practice Library website itself, if I go right back here and /learn, and maybe start kind of throwing up some questions that we can respond to. After this session, we're either going to go into the post-session chat, or we might, if it's possible, if it's easy, we might be able to set up some video. A video chat room will sort of to be defined. We have a video room. Betsy is amazing. So if you're interested in really having a play and getting your kind of hands dirty and have some questions and see if we can figure some things out together, because I have some skills. I also have the ability to break things in new and interesting ways. So there are some things that I haven't been game to kind of touch and poke. I still don't quite have my head around exactly how it all hangs together. So that's sort of one of the to be, do's sort of thing. In Github, there's a few little projects and stuff where I started kind of putting some of my to-dos publicly. So yeah, I'm going to kind of go through all of that as well. How are we going for time, Betsy? I think I'm I finished my material. Should I get a read from the room? Do you want me to go into some of my webinar content, or do we want to start playing around with GitHub and Netlify and Twitter and all of that kind of stuff? What does the room want next? I can teach you with this is my other prepared presentation, and there's lots of stuff there, but it's not it's really my kind of plan B. Do people want to start does anyone have any questions at this point?
Okay.
Before
there's a little bit of a delay
contents?
On the stream, so they're only just getting up to you asking the question. We've got some people saying webinar content, play with the tools. I want to see Netlify demo, the CMS demo.
Let's do demo. Let's do demo. All right. Okay, so I will just switch to this tab. And this is the Open Practice Library. So for those of you who haven't yet hit the link, there it is. Learn more is that /learn. This is what we say is we should send people to this page first to learn more about what the Open Practice Library is and where it came from and all of that kind of good stuff. Thank you, Red Hat, for being our kind of sponsor and big contributor to the first 5 years, but I'm hoping in terms of it being the biggest contributor at start, I'm hoping that will reduce over time as more people get involved. It's all Creative Commons, and Mobius Loop is the upstream from the Open Practice Library. So exploring the library itself, click, think. There we go. This has a kind of cute little interactive component in it that the different phases, if you click on them, you actually get a filter through of the different practices that are there. And there's lots of them. There's over 160 practices in the library now. The foundation and these little tabs also. These little buttons, also filter through into those different phases of the work. Now, tricky, if you know the name of the practice, then you can use this, but it's a filter, it's not actually search. So you have to kind of know the name. So there's one that, actually came up in one of the sessions today. I think Liz was talking about retrospectives, and they are, just retrospect, and it's filtered into these different retrospective practices. I did some fantastic interviews with some folk last year, which highlighted some of the kind of glitches and tricky bits around it. So there's definitely lots of issues, and we know about some of them, and others kind of get uncovered all the time. But it's all open, right? So we want to kind of start to think about what can we do, what can't we do, what are our limitations and constraints. Our hosting situation is a little bit precarious in some ways, and do I need to kind of put together a case for getting a more robust kind of hosting infrastructure behind it, yada, 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 all of these kinds of things. And also the sort of funding model is a little bit questionable at the moment. It's sort of all volunteer effort, and there's very small amounts of costs which are coming out of people's pockets at the moment, but it's not a lot, so it's sort of doable. So that's the site itself. This is Netlify. Now I'm already logged in, so it's not going to take me through the screenshots that I showed. But you can see, broadly speaking, this Kanban that I kind of had there. I can go in, so this check-ins one has been sitting around for a while. It's in draft mode. The author hasn't had a chance to come back to it yet, but this is the content management side of it. So there's a bunch of fields. Check-ins are, so you can see that here, and it's sort of this is pretty cool. It's sort of live. You can sort of see the live update here on the right. So you literally can very easily hit improve this practice on any practice and find yourself, in this interface. You can save it. You can say no, just delete those changes. That was madness. View a preview, and then importantly, set status. So fiddle around in draft. When you're happy with it, put it to in review. Once you've reviewed it with someone, we like to sort of have a collaborative process there, then you can move it to ready, and then that's sort of a signal to me as the maintainer to go, yep, okay, let me have a look and merge that in. Okay, so I'm just going to pop back to here. Now the other thing is, if you are going to add a new practice for the first time, you also need to create an author page for yourself. And so I'm going to go in there, and it's loading all of the entries of all the authors that we've had contribute, which is awesome. And in new author, this information is not actually there's not a page. We don't have a feature at the moment for having a profile for our authors. That's on the would like to have, or in the sort of the wish list. But do put your name as it would be displayed as attribution, and importantly your GitHub username, because that's how we're doing attribution, right? So they're the two important bits. The rest is completely optional and not necessary, but these two bits are necessary. And then go ahead and click save. Okay, so let me now jump to 7 ways anyone can contribute to the Open Practice Library. So this is on opensource.com. You can see published that in October, and it sort of goes through, it's a lightweight how to contribute to pretty much some of the things that I've sort of gone over, but that's an easy reference if you want to have a dig around in there. And then let me switch to one of the socials, which is the Twitter account for Practice Library. When I took over the maintainership of this, it had 2 followers, and I'm pleased to be able to say we've grown that 150-fold to 150, and even today we've added 4 new followers. So that's awesome. So this is one of the ways that I'm trying to kind of extend the reach and grow the community, is through outreach in various ways. So Twitter is one I mentioned, Instagram as a to do for the future, LinkedIn, wherever, like where people are, we need to go to them and evangelize what we're doing here and what we're trying to do, and see if people are willing to contribute. So that's one of the ways that I have some skills there. Like I have experience using Twitter, but I'm sure there are other ways and other communities and other ways to connect that we haven't necessarily explored. So that is that. Now, you wanted me to maybe have a little bit of a look at some of the other material that I covered. So let me just quickly go in here and really just one little thing about going back to the very start. And this is a bit of a thank you to Red Hat, because I joined Red Hat coming up on 3 years ago, after I'd spoken to Leslie Hawthorne and found out about the Open Practice Library. I actually got hired as an engagement lead. And the Open Practice Library is a little bit like the upstream for the Open Innovation Labs, which is where the part of Red Hat that I work in, I'm an engagement lead in the Open Innovation Labs. And I sort of say, like, well, Red Hat Enterprise Linux and Linux is upstream to RHEL. OPL is upstream to our labs. And it started out as a way of sharing knowledge in the team members of labs. And someone said, well, why aren't we doing this in the open? And that's how the Open Practice Library was born. How do the practitioners in our team share our knowledge in a way that's open and accessible and invites others to contribute? And that just really ignited my sense of community, my passion for free and open source software, but also my passion for people and teams and helping them do their best work. So that really how can I say it? That really like ignited the potential of this for me. And then a couple of years later to be asked to be the maintainer just felt like how did I manage to score this kind of moment in my life where I literally feel like a pig in mud and I'm able to participate in this place. It's just extraordinary. But now I'm kind of realizing how out of my depth I am and how much help I need. And so this is where I'm kind of like raising sending up the kind of flares and saying, please help. I know there's so much in common between the open source community and the agile community, but the connection is so tenuous that I feel like I just need to put out the call and say, hey, there's so much we can learn from each other in terms of our practices. Let's do it. And I think like Liz's talk this morning really speaks to that in that world of SRE and observability but the people side of it, right? It's not just technology. It's also bringing together these things as the socio-technical systems that they are, that we can't have one without the other, which comes back to the balance of our foundation of culture and tech together. So yeah, that's it. So let's go to questions if there are any. If not, then I might go and have a quick break and see you in the chat shortly. So Betsy, over to you.
We've got 2 questions. So I'll ask them now and then we'll move on. So the first one is, do open practice creators and contributors ever have any issues with IP? For example, proprietary practices going after them over use of names, trademarks, etc.
We haven't yet, and I think we've been lucky. Our get out of jail free card here is that a practice needs to be contributed by a practitioner, and there's no copyright on an idea, right? Yeah. So if you write it in your own words and from your own experience and give credit and attribution to where that idea came from, then I think legitimately you can share it as fair use and Creative Commons. But I am not a lawyer and that hasn't been tested. Great question.
When practices are superseded, what are the triggers to clean it up? How is that decided?
Oh, what an excellent question. Part of the bit that, here be dragons, and we don't necessarily have all the infrastructure and processes that we need, and that kind of ongoing curation is one of them. It also speaks to one of the, wished for features that we don't have is a way to curate a list of, what is a good starting set of practices or what's a recipe of practices. These are some of the things that we'd really like to develop, and curating for quality, popularity, applicability in different scenarios is also an area of future need and development.
Okay, there's one more question which has received quite a lot of upvotes, and normally I would moderate out a question like this, but I think it's actually there's probably some things that you could. I think it is good to ask you, especially in light of the conversations we've been having at this conference about community and burnout and so on. The question, which is now up to 8 upvotes, Donna, how do you remain so awesome?
The secret to that is that I'm not really, I'm just pretending.
Fair. It's a good answer.
But speaking to that, the bigger intent there is burnout is real, and some of you may have found me missing in action at various times, and sometimes I have to go do something else. I also really want to acknowledge the amazing support team, my support team of my felines who are curiously absent right now. But also some of you know Mr. Peter Leverink, also known as Cafuego, who frankly he was Chief Sanity Officer for linux.conf.au 2008, and he hasn't stopped being my Chief Sanity Officer. I couldn't do as much as I do without that. So acknowledging the people around you, taking the time to fit your own mask before fitting others, it's really important. So you don't see when I need to go and be in a dark room in a quiet place, right? You see the lights are on, kind of, Donna, not the lights are off, Donna.
Yeah, and yeah, support network is so important, whatever species. Yeah, and yeah, it's great to hear from you, because you are such a big, bright personality that keeps a lot of the community inspired, I think, judging from the chat. So you are appreciated.
Thank you, everybody. That's you're gonna make me cry. I'm gonna not cry because it's not cool. But no, I'm not even going to say that, because crying's fine, actually. Crying is really good, and if you need to cry, then I wholeheartedly encourage you to do so, where and when and as you need to. Crying is not something to be afraid or ashamed of.
No, absolutely.
Are there any other questions?
No, that's it. So we still are at almost 14 minutes before the end of the time slot. So we're finishing a bit early, but I think that's good. So there is a video. Oh yes,
Hang
Donna?
on, Betsy. I do have a little bit more material if people feel like they want a little bit more, but I'm also like really up for finishing early. Gives people a chance to go take a walk, go look at something other than a screen, all of that kind of stuff. So maybe we could get a quick read from the comments if people want more stuff or more time for themselves.
Post in the chat real quick. It's going to take a moment because there is a time delay.
We can be mindful and intentional and breathe in this moment.
Someone says early is good. Someone says more stuff. One more thing.
One more thing. Okay, that's like a compromise, all right?
Someone says one more, and then we'll move to the discussion.
All right, cool. So I'm using Miro. There's one more thing is I would absolutely love to learn about an open source alternative. So the one more thing I'm going to do is where I think the part of the intersection of, is that going to come in? Go. Is practice and experiment. I'm just going to zoom in on this part of the talk. And I'll also dig out the link to where I did this webinar and share that. Practice and experiment. This is really key to the Open Practice Library and key to what we do at labs, but also something that the open source community has done from the beginning, right, is have a go. Just start, try something, have a first crack, like Linus's very words, putting out Linux. Oh, this is just a hobby. It's never going to be big and professional, right? It's like start with something and lean into the collaborative potential of what you have started. You don't necessarily have to have all the answers. You only have to have the beginning, and then the welcome invitation to a community to come and help make that better. And I think that's really sort of at the heart of Open Practice Library, of open communities, and of great technology that supports humans. So on that note, I will thank you all so much. And please thank Betsy for being our amazing MC and wrangling. I know wrangling me is nothing I would ever want to have to do, because I know how much hard work it is. So thank you, Betsy. Thank you to the whole AV team, and thank you to the whole LCA infrastructure, core, crew, incidental, accidental, as you like it. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for spending time with us today.
And thank you, Donna, for sharing such lovely and interesting things and inspiring us all. Okay, so we have a video chat channel for follow-up discussion. It is called the Open Practice Library Discussion Room. You'll find it in the channels list in the sidebar. It'll be near the top because the video chat channels are up. So Open Practice Library Discussion. And then it is also we're going into our lunch break for this conference or other time zone appropriate long break. So sessions will resume at 1:30 conference time. So yeah, Donna, any last words about the discussion room or anything?
I will get the link from Etsy and see you in there shortly.
Great. All right. Bye.